Buenas and Hafa. The Committee on Environment, Procurement, Revenue and Taxation and Procurement is calling this roundtable hearing to order. It is 3 p.m. Wednesday, August 7, 2019. Notice of this afternoon's roundtable hearing was provided to senators, stakeholders, and local media on July 31st, meeting the 5-day notice, and August 5th, meeting the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of open government law. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues here today that have joined us in this roundtable. To my right is Senator Therese Terlahi, and to my left is Senator Kelly Marsh Titano. Thank you so much. I also like to thank all the agencies that have come here today, Guam EPA, Guam Solid Waste Authority, many members of the Mayor's Council that have, and GURA, members of GURA, the Director of GURA and Deputy Director of GURA is here today. Thank you for making it on this very important topic. The purpose of the roundtable hearing is to discuss illegal dumping. So some of the areas I want to focus on is the solutions, such as potentially incentives, enforcement, community support, and other things. Prior to the roundtable discussion, I had sent out a questionnaire to all the members, and we also invited Guam Department of Education, also Peggy Denny, as I believe other members to come here today. Unfortunately, Peggy Denny is sick and she won't be able to make it, but she will be sending her suggestions to our panel here. I would also like to recognize a community member, Dave Duenas. He also is the moderator for Man, Land, and Sea. It's a program on K57. So I think that's important that the media representative, as well as a public citizen, is here in support of this issue. So before we begin, I just wanted to inform those here today that there might be some time constraints. There is a 5 o'clock public hearing, and so I do appreciate a focused discussion. Of course, I want to balance that with everybody getting an opportunity to have their say. And I think many of you are on the front lines with illegal dumping, or you have some sort of role to play in providing and developing solutions. And I feel very positive that together, if we work together, we can improve the situation here in Guam. I would like to begin, if we can all, introduce ourselves, go around in the round table, introduce yourself and what agency or what capacity that you're here today. So if we can just go around the table, I've introduced already the senators, so we can start with Mr. Sablan.
Angel Sablan, Executive Director of the Mayor's Council of Guam.
Melissa Savares, President of the Mayor's Council of Guam, Mayor of Dedido.
Larry Gass, General Manager, Guam Solid Waste Authority.
Dave Duenas, Man, Land, and Sea Environmental Talk Show.
Glenn San Nicolas, Solid Waste Program Manager for Guam Environmental Protection Agency.
Ray Tapazna, Executive Director for GURA.
Liz Napoli, Deputy Director of GURA.
Okay, I would also like to acknowledge Senator Moylan. Thank you for joining us. So we can perhaps, so maybe I would like to allow each representative up to 5 minutes to discuss questions or respond to the question that I sent out. I understand that we're unable to respond to some inquiries immediately, and we should be able to follow up if necessary, should the information be requested by this committee. Okay, so the questions that I posed to the agencies, I'll just go ahead and describe them or state them. So the first question was, what does your agency find to be the root causes of illegal dumping? What role does your agency play in addressing illegal dumping? What procedures are in place to address it? Are there ways to evaluate effectiveness of actions taken to address illegal dumping? How fast does your agency respond to it? Does your agency have collaborative efforts with other agencies in addressing illegal dumping? And how can interagency efforts be increased? Do you have recommendations to change the law? And how can we mobilize the community or increase interagency collaboration? Okay, so we did receive a written testimony by Mr. Sablan. So let's just start with the first question. I guess we'll go around the table and talk about root causes. And if there, I also want to recognize there are other mayors here today. Thank you for being here. So if there's something that you would like to add to what's being said, in fact, we do have a couple seats. We have 2 more seats, so please join us up here. Feel free to come fill the seats. And maybe we can get more seats too.
My apologies, we've not seen the questionnaire. It wasn't
Okay.
sent to us, so. I mean, we're here to talk about what we've done since
Okay.
we've come on board, but we haven't seen the questionnaire.
Okay, maybe can we have a copy provided to, is there a way we can get a copy of the questions? Yes, thank you. Okay, so yeah, we can probably work this organically, but I feel, yeah, if you can address, does everybody have a copy of the questions? Maybe that's a starting point. Okay, so maybe we should get those questions to everybody so we can be on the same page. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Sablan. Thank you for preparing these answers in advance. So what do you feel is the root cause of illegal dumping?
Well, after listening to, of course, many of the mayors and vice mayors, I'll just go down
Sure.
the list here. One of the main causes, root causes of illegal dumping, of course, is disposal fees. Residents just do not want to pay for disposing of trash. In fact, many of those who dump illegally do not even have a trash bin, again, because they cannot afford the monthly fee. B is the unenforceable citations. How many residents have ever been convicted of illegal dumping? How many residents have paid a fine for being caught dumping illegally? I'm sure that if we check court records, there will be a minuscule amount or none at all. In fact, if we check how many citations have been issued for illegal dumping, we probably will have a big fat 0. A third root cause is the closure of the Dededo transfer station. The closure of the Dededo transfer station exacerbated the illegal dumping in the northern area of the island. Residents will just not drive to the central or southern transfer stations when it is more convenient to just dump it on the roadside of Dededo and Jigo. It's a matter of economics. Why pay for more gas and tipping fees? D is a complete disregard of recycling efforts. Many residents still do not understand the value of recycling, such as white goods, loose metals, junk cars, tires, and the like. Instead of bringing these items to permitted recycling centers, it is easy to just leave them on the roadside or just dump them in some unoccupied jungle area. And E, my thoughts, is just keeping up with the Joneses attitude. Our coral roads are littered with air conditioners, washers, refrigerators, TVs, due to the new items on the market at fairly cheap prices. Everyone wants to get the latest item of the latest gadgets and smarter than the one they currently have because their neighbors have it. So again, it is much easier to just throw away the old one on the roadside when no one is looking. These are my 5 major root causes, and I'm sure the mayors have others that they've experienced, but after talking with them, I can tell you that these are probably, and I probably bet going around the table here that they'll come up with the same reasons.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to add to those lists of potential root causes of illegal dumping? So just to recap, people are not paying for collections, closure of the Dededo transfer station, there's lack of enforcement, and then just consumerism, increased consumerism, and so there's more trash being generated from that angle. And there's really a lack of recycling efforts, or it seems a disregard of recycling efforts. So is there anything, other root causes that you see that we can bring it up for discussion
Okay,
besides what was mentioned?
what they normally do is that they pay other people to dispose their trash. Instead of the individual that they're paying disposing the trash where it's supposed to be dumped at, they just throw it on the side of the road. That's all I have to say because that's all I've been seeing in the community. But what it all boils down is that we have to be a little bit more harsh in these people that do illegal dumping.
Okay.
On that note about being harsher, anybody who accepts money for disposing of property in Florida and illegally dumps it, it's classified as a felony. It is not a ticket. It is not a fine. It is jail time because they're accepting money to do something as a business, and if they fail to do it, they're going to jail.
Okay, so, sorry, let's just back up a little bit. But yes, we want to get to those points. Those are really good points, and we're going to address them. But I just want to make sure that we have all the root causes that we can identify for now.
Hafide, I just want to mention one that's been proffered by someone, and I don't know the actuality of it, but it sounds like it could have some logic to it. And so they were saying, well, it's maybe two parts, but one is that they are saying that the regulations for apartment buildings and buildings in general, that the trash bins, the regulations don't require what they now should be requiring for the size of the trash bins or the number of the trash bins. And so in an apartment building, an apartment complex, or a building, a commercial building, that the bins are filling up too quickly and then they're just resorting to something else. So I don't know the reality of that, but I thought I'd pass it on since people have mentioned it to me. And I think it does go in with the commercialism. The more that we're purchasing right now, I know for my husband and myself, we're a two-person household, and we fill up a bin incredibly fast, just the way that things are packaged nowadays and so forth. And so I think that needs to be a reality. Are our bins sufficient might be the way to have us consider it.
Okay, so yeah, I think now is a good time for Guam EPA to provide some insight or how we can address these things.
So some of the root causes that we find out at illegal dump sites are costs for disposal, convenience, and the side hustle, people providing trash disposal services that are not permitted. And most illegal dumpers do not have trash service. So given a choice to either have a service or take it yourself, they're choosing to take it themselves and take it to these illegal dump sites to dispose of it.
Okay.
And I agree with the senator. Inadequate trash containment. I think that condominiums and apartment complexes, they need to have trash bins capable of accommodating their trash needs. So if you have a 50-unit apartment and there's only 10 vacancies, you still have a capability of providing disposal services for 50 units. Should be required.
Okay. All right. So,
Yeah.
Ray?
Can I add to that? I completely agree with everything that was said earlier, but what we discovered at GURA, that, and just to let you know, GURA pays for all of our public housing. We reimburse them we require that they contract out with GSWA, and we reimburse them for that. But even at that, we discovered that there's a serious illegal dumping problem, at least in some of our developments. So I think we need to take it a step further. There obviously is an education or a lack of education with some of the, particularly some of the residents, perhaps maybe some of the migrants from the other islands. 39% of our public housing residents are from our neighboring islands. So I think the outreach is critical. And when we get to number 2, we'll talk about what we've been doing over the last 7 months between Liz and myself. But basically, what we discovered with our public housing program is they're still dumping even though we're paying for their trash pickup. And it's a very serious problem. In one particular development, it's going to, in totality, because we're having to erect a fence, it's going to cost about $300,000 for us to clean up, just in agate alone. So I'm just letting you know, it's more than just the fact that it costs a lot of money to pay for trash pickup. Even when we're paying for it, there's still dumping going on, illegal dumping.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Duenas.
It's great to hear from Gura that your tenants are required to have, it's already in the lease, that the picking up of trash is already in the lease. I think we should expand that to all landlords, whether it be single dwelling, apartment complexes, etc. Have it in their lease that should you rent from me, you have to show proof, certification from Guam Solid Waste that you do have trash to be picked up. Following up on the size of the bins, some of the commercial buildings, as you're aware, do have bins, but maybe they're not big enough for the amount of tenants that they need to service. That needs to be addressed, as well as a timely pickup from the commercial provider to pick them up in a timely manner. So once again, one of the biggest things I wanted to address was to, whether it be through legislation, to have it in the lease that every household has to have trash picked up. Either they get picked up or they dump it illegally. And in this case, if it's in the lease and they show proof that they have services that will be provided, and it's in the lease, I think that would solve a big chunk of the problem. And then going back to the landfill, the Dedado landfill is closed. We've had Angel Sablan, the Mayor's Council, speak about that. I'm very adamant about that facility should be reopened. I'm not sure as to why it was closed in the first place. I believe there was mentioned that the grounds might be contaminated. With that said, it was also brought to my attention that if that is the case, then why is there a recycling center just a quarter mile down the street, which accept vehicles and every other thing? So I don't know exactly why the Dedado transfer station was closed, but that definitely needs to be looked at and reopened if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry if I can just diverge a little bit. So Larry Gast, is there a possibility to reconstruct the Dedado transfer station, and what would the cost for that be?
I would have to investigate that, but you got to remember right now that we have 3 transfer stations that are residential only and 1 commercial transfer station. The entire Orange County had 2 transfer stations for over 1 million people. And it's a much larger area than here. It's the 2 transfer stations we have towards the south end are costing money. We don't generate enough revenue to basically pay for the construction and the operation of those transfer stations. That's why the Harmon transfer station was designed at the size it is and staffed the way it is, was to handle most of the northern portion of the island.
So, Mayor Savaras, when they closed that transfer station in Dedido, what did you see as a result of that? What year was that?
I believe it was like 6, 7 years ago, and I was there when at the time that it was closed. What had happened, Senator, is that the governor's legal counsel at the time, Sandra Miller, came to us with the deputy director of DPW, Jesse Pelican at the time, and we had a meeting with Mayor Rudy Matanani and myself, and they had shared with us about the cost to keep this transfer station open. And it was costing over $2 million that the government, the administration at the time, did not have. And of course, they had some federal EPA regulations that were violated. And of course, if they didn't correct the problem, then they would have had to pay the fine if it was not closed. And then, of course, the additional cost to keep it open over the year. What they promised to us was to open the transfer station at DPW and to include hazardous waste, appliances, and other material that would not regularly be able to be disposed of at the northern transfer station. So therefore, Mayor Mantanani and I did agree that with the closure and so that we prevent the government from being fined and then allow for additional goods, especially when it came to the hazardous waste, the used oil, used paints, that residents can dispose of for free. We agreed that collectively between Dedido and Jigo to close that and allow our residents to dispose the additional items for free. The only thing that they were paying for was the load of household trash. But as far as the appliances, the boxes, the wood, and the hazardous waste, that would be able to be accepted for free at no cost, and they just pay the household trash. So that's what we agreed between the two, myself and Mayor Matanani. And we did go to district court for that, to the courts for that, and you know, like I said, I put myself out there that said, okay, we're willing to have the transfer station in Dedido closed because of the, you know, the cost to keep it open, plus the federal EPA fines that were going to be assessed to the government of Guam, which the administration during the time, it was the Calvo administration, did tell us that there was no money to pay for that. You know, the administration didn't have, we were looking at $2 million to pay for the fines that were being assessed plus.
Okay. Yeah, what's the status of the violation in that area?
I'm not sure if there was a we don't, you know, I don't know, because after that, then of course we were dismissed from court, and of course the cleanup, DPW did the cleanup of the area, moved all of the waste that was there, and focused on opening and operating the central location up at the Harmon Industrial Park.
Did you have a question regarding that?
So that Harmon Industrial Park is the one that you had anticipated, and that's operating as you had anticipated?
Yes, yes. And, you know, of course, the only ones that were restricted from going to that particular waste facility was, of course, the government entities. We still had to go to Mr. Rubbishman to do our disposals. Okay. But residents were able to go there at a cost of either $7.50 or $15, depending on their load.
I also want to follow up with the mandatory collections. So I think this question is again towards Larry Gast. So I think the big issue about mandatory collections is that many of our community members cannot afford the $30.38 charge per month. Is there a possibility of providing lower fees for, let's say, a smaller bin that's affordable to the predominant population?
That may be something that could be looked at to try to determine what we can do. I can tell you right now that probably once we have our audit done, the way the receiver had kept track of costs, I've got a feeling that our current costs for household collection is going to be higher than the revenue we receive.
Sorry, do you have a question?
Dispensa, I didn't mean to cut you off because what you were saying is important. With those mandatory collections, so you were mentioning possibly like a smaller bin, although I was just mentioning for 2 people, we fill up both our bins like super fast. So is there, does it become overly complicated, or do you think there's a reasonable way to say that people who qualify for certain things, WIC program, or, you know, they have some sort of income level that would allow them to have like a rated rate of paying, like a, yeah.
That would kind of be...
Especially, oh, sorry, especially versus the cost to all of us in paying for cleaning up illegal dumping. I mean, if we add that into the mix of what it's truly costing us overall.
Well, the thing is that is something that would be considered on a community level, but you have to remember that I am basically a utility, and if I start cutting costs for one customer for the exact same service, that means the other customers are putting more money in to pay and subsidize the people that are getting the cut rate. And that's something that I've never worked with the Public Utilities Commission here, whether that would be an acceptable function. To me personally, I have a dislike for doing that. Not that the people don't deserve a break, but if people are participating in the program, they need to share the equal costs of the operation of the program.
And I agree with some of the main points, but you know, part of the situation that we face is we have these economic conditions where something like 80% of our school children qualify for free lunch, and if our economic conditions are thus, it creates a different set of situations. That's one of the things I wanted to ask you, what you thought was different about Orange County. So perhaps some of it, not all of it, Orange County is going to have a range of people that can afford things and earn certain incomes. But if we have such a high level of people working to get by and make ends meet, and we largely do this better than we would because we have large familial extended family systems, if that was not in place, life would be even harder. I think somehow, some way, whether it's thinking of an answer, whether it's considering different rates, but those economic realities have to be something that we consider. And then, like I said, the cost to us all when it comes to cleaning up that illegal dumping, like I don't know if that fits within your realm, but in the larger picture, it costs us dearly. But maybe also if you can think of any differences between us and Orange County, why there might be some of those differences, why it works more for them to have just 2 transfer stations?
To follow up on some of the stuff that you said, the mandatory collection would be able to reduce rates if there was another funding source for it. If there was something that offset and made whole all the participants. And then as more and more participants get in and the rate can come down, it can. But you've got to remember, when somebody gets in the system, it's over $100 for a bin for garbage. It's over $100 for a bin for recycling. To provide them with that, it's going to take 7 months before just that cost is recouped, much less all of the costs for collection, all of the costs for that. We are not a rich agency. We barely meet our revenues to our expenses. We do not have extra money sitting around anywhere that a lot of people seem to feel that we do. Off of the receiver's budget, we ended up with about $260,000 plus on the black side. And that was before we got a notification that we owed the PUC $200,000 for back payments. We also had to have a $300,000 management audit. And now I'm having to cut costs to meet our obligations that we have. And we're cutting out everything that is not essential. And if our revenues go down and our costs go up, we're going to have to keep doing more and more. So sitting here right now, without doing a lot more research and studying, I would say that us providing a differential payment program would not be likely, that unless there is another funding source for it. And that's,
And that leads me to my next question. So I know that there are programs out there, and maybe they're too different, and so maybe nothing applies, but it's always good to check and see. There are programs out there to try to get people healthy, and so I've been in places where there can be programs where as you sign up for a commitment and you sign a contract, you get a free bicycle. You're promising that you're going to ride it X number of times, a week or a month or whatever it is. Is there any sort of a federal program that comes to mind at all, or that you think might be possible to help families where $200 for these bins would be a struggle, but some sort of program for those who are struggling in that sense to make up for helping them meet some of their basic needs that could be applied for by the Guam Solid Waste Authority?
there are no grants that I'm aware of that does anything like that. Now, what I can say is that the co-op, the electrical co-op in Putnam County, did have a program, what they called Round It Up. You could round your cents on your bill to the next higher dollar, or you could round your dollar and cents to the next higher 10, and all of that money went to assist people who were having difficulties paying their utility bills. But those were all voluntary programs that went into effect. I know of no, there's no real assistance for garbage collection. That has been deemed by the courts generally as a local issue, and that's where no real money comes into it.
Senator, is there any way you can go ahead and incorporate a repayment of the bin on a monthly basis, maybe at $10 more until such time that the cost of the bin? Because if all the customers were given free bins, how are you going to recoup in order for them to pay it back? That's why a lot of these guys don't pay, because they can't afford the monthly, but they can afford to buy their cigarettes and their beers. You know, if you make it that they will be able to go ahead and enroll in the bin, in the trash collection, and then if it's $30 a month, why don't you tag on, make it $40, $45 until such time that the bin is paid for? So that way they can afford to do that. Because right now we can talk about all the things we have. I think I came here thinking more in line of prevention, detection, and all the illegal dumping, all the root causes and all the reasons why they dump, until such time that the government shows a concerted effort to show that we mean business. Because, it really adds to how the image of our island is, not only to our various villages, but to the island as a whole. Until we get surveillance cameras, because people are creatures of habit. When they dump there, they're going to come back and dump again. When you try to clean it and then put surveillance, they'll just go somewhere else and do the same thing. But until such time that we put the public at notice that we are serious about this problem, it's never going to go away. We can talk about this and talk about that, but we need to provide some kind of deterrence, maybe impose stiffer penalties and fines, and
Sorry, excuse me,
do
Mayor.
something.
Yeah, we're going to
do
get to
surveillance.
that question.
Yes,
yeah,
but
thank
we're
you.
hopping around.
Thank
We'll
you.
never have enough time, Senator, to get to all the 1 to 8. But until we address, the root cause, and then what are the recommendations to do detection, the apprehension, the prosecution, and then the adjudication, so that we make people serve as notice to others that there's a price to pay when you illegally dump. Because there's no really differentiation between littering and dumping until the public knows exactly what's the difference between littering. It's just the same effect. It just throws a black eye to our island. But I gotta go, but I'm on flood watch right now. So until we talk about deterrence, okay? Because we're beyond public education. Everybody knows this is a common problem all over the island. It's not unique to just one village. Illegal dumping is everywhere. Until we provide some kind of deterrence and surveillance so that we can get those culprits that are doing it. They don't want to pay, but they're increasing our costs for them doing it illegally. We clean it up, they just come and dump it again because there's no form of prevention and apprehension. So until we come to that, I suggest that everybody come in with whatever recommendations to detect these people and then do the apprehension and the adjudication so that they can learn their lessons. Because if you're not caught, they're going to continue doing it anyways. So until such time that we provide some kind of deterrence, and then we provide a form of apprehension and detection, they're not going to keep dumping because they know that there's no surveillance cameras there, so they don't do it in the bright lights.
Thank you, Mayor. I
thank you,
appreciate your comments. So we were going to work. Yeah. So basically, we did follow up with some of the root causes as far as potential responses, and thank you, Larry Gass, for responding to those potential solutions. So we want to move on to the second question. What role does your agency play in addressing legal dumping? So we'll start with Mayor Tavares.
Okay. Well, of course, Angel reported for our, you want to go ahead and report the collective number 2?
What role do we play? The mayors are, Senator Owa can tell you is they clean, and I say they clean, and they clean, and they clean. And then I'll give you an example. I get a phone call from some irate resident in Dedero on Batulu Road. He goes, Mr. Sablan, I've seen that bag of trash bag there full of Pampers next to the bus stop. And so I called the mayor, and then they send somebody out to pick it up and clean it. And lo and behold, the very next day, a trash of Pampers is there again. And so the caller calls back and says, you guys, you didn't do anything. I said, yes, they did. They went out and they cleaned it. And it's just like a vicious cycle. I mean, you go to the coral roads in Deredo, and I'm sure Larry has gone, everybody has gone there, and you'll see just trash bags and trash bags of things you don't even want to open up because you don't know what's in there. And people that do the nonprofit or that go out and do these things every month or whenever they want to program, they collect all of this stuff, but they clean that day, and then the next day. That's why in my testimony I said, people are more content in planting trash than planting flowers, because that's, and then, of course, the mayors have the role of the litter citation. But then, even if they find a trash bag full of, who do you cite? Mm-hmm. People are getting smart now. They don't put their power bills in there anymore, or anything that has their address or their name. And so, who do we cite? I'm sure Glenn can tell you that even if they call EPA and say, hey, there's a whole road of trash bags there's nothing that they can do either because they don't know where it came from or who to credit the thing to. So it's just a whole. I wish we had easy answers, but there are no easy answers to this. It's just, I'm sure Mayor can, yeah.
Senator, I'll also share, because it doesn't just happen in coral roads, the pipeline areas that many of us have. Tangisan Beach is another area. Tangisan, you used to have the power plant at the end of the street. We used to have people maintaining the area going to Lost Pond and Shark's Hole. But since then, and DPR doesn't have their pavilions there anymore where families would go down and camp out and just spend their weekends there. We get different groups, and many of them coming from military organizations, volunteer groups, and we all know the famous coastal cleanup that's done once a year. My office gets called once a month from every different groups that ask, can you support us at Tangisan Beach? And yes, what we'll do is we'll ask what organization, we'll bring a trailer down, we'll leave the trailer, give them trash bags, gloves, ask them to sort out accordingly, your white goods. And you can clean up white goods this month, and you go down with a different group the following month. There'll be refrigerators, water heaters, stoves, and maybe a junk car. So it's about sorting. We're very good about sorting these things and taking them to the proper disposal sites. But the trailer's also there to haul out the household trash. We even have families that live down there, and we ask them, one, go check in at the homeless shelter so we can get you a better place to live. But mayors continue, like Angel had mentioned, will go out weekly, daily, whenever, and most of the time, our street maintenance budget is to address the street side of the roads, the trash that's littered, and in our parks. That's what our budget entails us, to make sure that our sides of the streets are clean and our park areas are usable. But the extra money, there's usually not very much extra money because our budget is equally divided. So the little money that we have, and we're tapping into each other's budget, funding, is that whether or not there's enough money there to cover it, the mayors and offices will continue to remove the debris. I have a purchase order for $7,000 for our first load at solid waste at Mr. Rubbishman is free. Any trash loads that come in after that for the particular day gets charged to us. Most of the time, if it's a full load with a trailer, it's $171. That $7,000 purchase order doesn't get me very far. We have to keep replenishing the account. So whether or not it's the responsibility of the village mayor, Parks and Recreation doesn't have disposal money. We allow them, because they also clean parks in our area, to bring whatever illegal dumping they have from their sports complex to all the parks that they're also in charge of. Bring it to us, because I would rather you bring it to us than, and so it's the agencies helping each other, but at the end of the day, it's the mayor's council that pays for this disposal. So what are we doing about the illegal dumping? We're trying to we remove it when we see it, and like Angel said, it grows. The Pamper Bandit at Batulu Road, I've gone to all the daycare centers to make sure that the daycare centers in my village have a receptacle, because they're running a business, and a receptacle that's enough, is sufficient enough to run their daycare. But I get bags of Pampers if it's not every day, it's every other day. So it must be a private babysitter that's, has nowhere to go. But even the golf course, GICC has complained to me because on several occasions, the dogs rip up those bags of Pampers and it looks like it snowed on green number 7, because that's where the Pampers went from the street. So mayors and vice mayors will continue to pick up the trash, and that's what we do about illegal dumping. When we can, we all only have 5 maintenance workers. So remember that we still need to cut the grass at the parks, cut the streets, take care of the village, set up for mates. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Larry Gast.
When we were discussing earlier about both commercial, residential, and single-family residential buildings, the thing is, it doesn't need to just be residential. All commercial entities need to have trash service. Every commercial entity needs it, or else they say, well, I've got a small business, I'll just take it home and throw it in my garbage at home. Well, now you've got the system that's serving residents subsidizing a commercial entity by accepting that waste and taking up airspace at the landfill, which should have been paid for through a commercial contract. And the whole system needs to be worked, needs to be expanded to where there's a requirement for you to have garbage service. If you're required to have garbage service, then what incentive is there for you to throw it away? To dump it on the side road, to dump it on the side of the road. And I know what these people are going to. Every weekend I volunteer at Gain. And I drive from down here all the way up, and I'll see crews out on one Saturday cleaning everything up, and I go by the next day, Sunday, and there's trash all over the road again. And it's not an acceptable attitude. That's why some of my root causes that I had was that economics, yes. No enforcement, yes. Those are two main ones. But one of mine was cultural. That it's a cultural thing. And to give an example, some of my staff said, how come most of our people in our program that come into the office to sign up are from the States? I said, because they're lazy. I said, people from the United States are used to putting their garbage in a cart. It goes out to the curb. It disappears. They have no worry about it. For generations, Chamorros have been taking care of their trash for themselves. They've been taking care of their fathers, their grandfathers, their aunts. One person would do it. They'd fill their pickup truck and then take it and get rid of it. And that's the way for generations that their feeling has been. It's like, to them, they feel they're doing nothing wrong in handling the trash that way. That's the way they handled it for generations. And it's hard to fix that. That is something that cannot be waved with a magic wand and taken care of unless they have a place to dispose of the waste legitimately, properly, and taken care of. And that's with everybody, commercial and residential, having the right waste collection.
Thank you. Mr. Duenas?
Yeah, echoing on what Larry's saying, very true. It's all about an attitude. We spoke about this. How do we change the attitude of most of the people out there? Is to constantly put it in front of them that the problem exists and what possibly they can do. As an example, we see these big illuminated billboards out there in Tumon, the big giant screens. I've approached them and I said, would you be receptive to putting a ad up there or a graphic up there letting the people know to throw their trash, to keep Guam clean? And they're willing to do it for free. All I did was ask. They said, sure, we'll put it up there. So we need to constantly do what we can to change the attitude. As Larry calls it, the culture. It's an attitude problem. Excuse me. On my talk show, I even had people call up. I know it's a far-fetched idea, but he said, why don't we mandate it to GDOE that every student, when they go to school 5 days a week, come in and bring in plastic bottles of water or aluminum cans. If they bring it in, it's part of a school project. Not only does some of them are redeemable for a refund, but it reduces the amount that goes to the landfill. So I thought that was a pretty good idea as well. Again, attitude is a major thing. Larry can probably testify to the fact that how many households do we have in Guam? How many of them are actually signed up for trash pickup? Larry, you had a number for that?
It's about half of them.
Half. We need to do something to ensure that the remaining half get on board. And like Larry says, not just residential, but commercial. Anyway, in a nutshell, that's we just need to change the attitude, get everybody on board, whether it be through legislation, get them signed up, show proof that they are signed up for trash pickup. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. St. Nicholas? So what role does your agency play, and what procedures are in place to address illegal dumping?
Oh, great. I can answer question 2 and 3. Nice. Okay, so the role of the agency basically is to enforce, investigate illegal dump sites, and we do that by receiving complaints from the general public. We use a variety of methods in investigating the sites, surveillance techniques. We have cameras that we deploy, and we also rely on heavily on the mayors and their support. When we identify a site, we actually go through trying to find prima facie evidence that would lead us to an alleged violator, and if none is found and it's on the public easement, unfortunately, we refer that to the mayor's office for cleanup. Unfortunately, they don't have a cleanup budget for that. They have a recycling revolving fund that addresses the bulky metallics, the abandoned vehicles, and waste tires, but they don't have a fund for solid waste. So the procedures that we have in place to address illegal dumping, well, Guam EPA implemented a disposal plan requirements to address construction demolition debris, which was problematic about 10 years ago. In its implementation, we review the plans for its consistency, then we do compliance evaluation inspections, and we found that 80% of that illegal dumping of construction demolition debris had decreased throughout the years. We do the occupancy inspections for compliance. The recycling revolving fund, of course, addresses junk vehicles, scrap metals, and tires. The permitting processes that are in place for the solid waste management facilities and the collection services, which is really important because there's a lot of people out there that offer services for a fee, and they're not permitted, and they end up taking it to some isolated area and illegally dumping it. And after investigation, we find that the alleged violator hired somebody else to get rid of their trash for them. So they're still responsible for that cleanup. We do have a Walters database for our solid waste tracking that we definitely rely on in terms of investigating our sites. We do 4 to 5, sometimes 6 villages per quarter, rotating it. So eventually we hit all 19 villages. We used to get complaints in, first out. That wasn't working, so we're consolidating it into villages. Guam Solid Waste Management Program is not just mandated to investigate solid waste complaints, but also we do permits and a lot of permit reviews and plan reviews and inspections for compliance. So again, that's another that'll be another question down the road that I ask or give an answer to. And of course, we enforce. So we enforce by issuing litter citations, written warnings, notice of violations, and orders of compliance.
Do you have a question? Okay.
How many cameras are you deploying right now?
Right now we have 2 active cameras that we have. And unfortunately, even with the camera systems, you see it in Facebook and on WhatsApp, people robbing homes with camera in view, and it's just you can't even catch them because the quality. So we're having the same problems with ours, but we're still trying to partner up with other organizations who have cameras in place. So that seems to be working pretty well, but it's still again a work in progress. My question is that we have cameras all over the island at these traffic stoplights, and if we can get them working, I think that would help definitely identify where these waste streams are coming from.
All right, and one of the very early hearings that I ever attended as a senator, EPA said that the cameras that they had installed were being stolen or broken. And so I just thought you didn't use those anymore. So you do have two. Do you have a plan to use these in like pipeline areas or not residential areas or traffic areas, but low traffic areas?
Yeah, right now they're deployed at a location that we're monitoring. We actually got a violator, and we had them clean up the site, and then they were also issued a citation.
So you still
and
find
then
them to be usable, still a valid technique?
It's still a valid technique considering our limited resources. If we can, and it's going to be down further in the questions, and I'll go ahead and explain how we can leverage other agencies that are also mandated to help with the litter citation program and illegal dumping.
Thank you. Senator Moreland, do you have a question? Okay, thank you. All right, so Mr. Tapasnia.
Okay, I'll speak a little, then I'll turn it over to my deputy. But basically, as far as GORA is concerned, collectively we house 3,370 families. That's between Section 8 public housing and Guma Tranquilidad. With public housing, there's 750 units that we have from Mauricio all the way up to Derrido. So as far as GORA is concerned, we have a lot of leverage. We strengthen our policies, and Liz will talk more about that later. But what we did when we came on board is we discovered that there was illegal dumping that perhaps some of the families that we provide shelter to were involved with. So over the course of 2 months, we conducted 17 town hall meetings. I believe, Senator, you attended one or a couple of them. So we had town hall meetings, again, from Derrido down to Molesto. These town hall meetings were very effective, we believe. I was there, or the deputy director was there, many of our board members are there. And basically, our position was we're going to have to crack the whip. This is a serious problem, and as far as GORA is concerned, we at least can control the families that we provide shelter to. And we've made it very clear to them that if they're caught participating in any illegal dumping activities, that they could jeopardize their ability to remain in public housing. So we're doing our part, and I want to turn the mic over because my deputy director is actually the one that oversaw those town hall meetings and working directly with our public housing program to make sure that we're enforcing those rules.
I'm sorry, you said it, but I just want to reiterate, please. You said 3,070?
3,370 families that we provide shelter to between Section 8 public housing and Guma Tranquilidad.
And they get free garbage pickup?
With public housing, that's mandatory. With Section 8, because we're dealing with independent private landlords, it's a little bit more complex than that, but I'll have the deputy talk about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. When we did the town hall meetings, they were mandatory town hall meetings because one of our sites, we discovered there was illegal dumping happening there. And it was a serious problem where we ending up having to put a higher fence. The problems are really more with our southern property sites, like in Jonya, Talafufo, Inarajan, Molesto, Agat, and Umatic, because many of those properties have jungle behind them. So very easy to just have them throw things in the back. So it was really mostly, they weren't dumping outside of, it was just dumping on behind the properties. So when we had the town hall meetings, what I actually did was I went around to each site and I took pictures before the town hall meetings. I took pictures of their units and their pictures behind. And I think this was very effective in letting them know that we were serious about getting a handle on it and putting a stop to it. And we basically told them, I have a picture of what your unit looks like now and the dumping that's behind it. And everybody, of course, said it wasn't me. And we said, okay, we are going to be giving citations because our lease agreements do have where they are supposed to maintain their properties, their boundaries a certain way. And we said, you're violating your lease agreement if you have dumping behind your unit or even just in the backyard, much less over the fence or in the jungle. And we said, once we clean it up, there is going to be ongoing monitoring. You're going to get your citations. If we come back and you have another citation, then the next thing will be you're going to end up getting a 30-day termination notice. And our staff at all the different AMP sites have been very good about issuing the citations, about going back and reporting to me, because I do check with them, okay, which ones are still in violation or not in compliance. And then giving them another citation, giving them their 30-day notices. And one of the things we told them was, we have 3,000 plus more people on a waiting list, both with Section 8 and public housing. It would not be hard for us to replace them, with people that may be more deserving of getting subsidies, public housing subsidies. So the other thing was visibility. I let them know that, okay, this is my first visit out, but it's not going to be our last. I will be coming around, and they have seen me. I've gone back to follow up, and the good news is that many of those I have a reputation. They're scared of me coming around, but seriously, many of them have cleaned up. We even have our staff telling them, okay, we may not be able to help you take all of it, so we'll stage an area, put it there, we'll come and we'll collect it and take it to the transfer station for you. So we've worked it out, so we tell them, look, we don't want you going to dump behind or even off-site. It's a serious problem. We are not, because even if you dump it off-site, if we find out that you're caught, that's a violation and you're risking your tenancy with GURA. So that's one of the steps we're taking, is we're really letting them know that we are enforcing. And we're also encouraging them, there are ways to, if you have too much trash, there are ways to have people help you take it to the transfer station. I've shared with them, the transfer stations are pretty clean. I go there all the time because I recycle a lot, and sometimes I don't, I need to put more garbage than is allowed in the monthly pickups, right? And I said, there's ways to ask for help. You don't need to be dumping it elsewhere. But I think our lease agreements, being able to enforce the citations and the 30-day notices, our ongoing random monitoring, also our ongoing monitoring of whether they've dropped off the solid waste payments. And they're supposed to be on it, they sign up, they show us that they've signed up, but then they drop off, they stop paying. We have a way to get a list from solid waste management that says whether they still are paying or not. And if we find out they've dropped off, then we give them another citation because they're in violation of their lease agreement. Another thing is collaboration with the mayors. There are a couple mayors down south that we've collaborated with, and we've told them, if you see a problem and it's near around our public housing sites, please let us know, and we'll take care of it, with your help if need be. The other thing is surveillance cameras. We are in the process of purchasing surveillance cameras for our properties so that we see people going in and out. It's also for their safety, to deter crime. But it's also because we can tell whether, we see a truck coming in with trash and then they leave without the trash, right? And another thing that we're doing as well is signage. We are also in the process of procuring signs that we will place at each of our public housing sites that say no illegal dumping, and also cite how much the fine is. Because that's the other thing I told them. I said, All we need to do is have EPA after us because of like the illegal dumping site that we had at one of our projects. All we need is for EPA to close down the entire development. You guys are going to be out of housing because they're going to say it's a health and safety hazard and the illegal dumping is so serious, this development needs to be closed down, and then we get fined. So we really came down hard on what they're risking with illegal dumping. And we promise you that we are monitoring. I go out regularly, and I will be going out regularly I actually walk the streets, and I go front and back, I take a look, because I don't want to have to answer to my boss, and he doesn't want to have to answer to HUD when we spend monies that we shouldn't have to spend on, a problem like that.
That's great. If I could just ask a follow-up question about Section 8, you said that's a little bit different.
Right, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Section 8, because they are able to take their vouchers and rent from landlords. Landlords do have a lease agreement as well with GURA. And part of their lease agreement does indicate that they do need to provide, trash bin of some sort for the residents to use. So there is also something in the lease agreement between the landlords and GURA where they do have to have some kind of receptacle for the tenants to be able to take their trash to.
And if I can just, there was a press release that we sent out just Monday. So the Board of Commissioners at GURA actually approved our request to procure 52 additional cameras to add to our CCTV surveillance systems. So we're really, really ramping things up. And that's just the first round. We're going to be purchasing more cameras as we identify certain strategic areas that we want to place these cameras. But yeah, we're doing the best we can given the resources we're allotted.
Great, thank you. And I believe also in a previous discussion, what about requiring permitted haulers in the case that if the tenants want to go through an independent party versus them bringing it to the transfer station themselves?
That's right. I think we changed our administrative plan to also talk about that you cannot just go pay somebody who doesn't have a business license to take your trash away because you don't know where they're really taking it if they don't have a business license. And it's illegal anyway. So we have also discussed that. We have addressed it with our public housing sites.
Is that going to be included in the rules as far as is it up for adoption by the board?
Yes, we have our administrative plan. I think that's coming up at the end of August.
Great, thank you for the hard work. Any follow-up questions by my colleagues?
Just on the cameras, you don't find them to be getting broken or things like that?
Well, currently we only have 10 cameras. We're adding another 52 to that, so we've increased it 4 times over. But primarily the cameras were intended because of all these mass shootings, that's occurring in the U.S. So we wanted to provide some level of security to the staff and management of the housing authority. But these cameras are going to be placed not just at the main office, but at various developments. We don't want to say where they're at specifically, but that's just the first round. We plan to assess and see where else we can be placing these cameras. I know EPA mentioned they have 2. Maybe we can loan them a couple. But yeah, we should be getting more as we go along.
Sorry, Senator Moreland, do you have a follow-up question? Okay. Wait, sorry, just if I can ask one more thing. So do you monitor these lease agreements with Section 8 landlords? Or how do you monitor them? How frequently do you monitor them?
Actually, we do have inspectors that go out, and sometimes what usually happens is they get complaints. So when they get the complaints that, like passersby see that the dumpster is really overflowing, right? They do call GURA and say, if that apartment complex is one of your Section 8 landlords, you need to address their dumpster problem, right? And so our inspectors will go out and they will, address it with the landlords. So yes, if we get the complaints or when they go out and do their regular inspections and they see that it's not adequate, they do bring it to their attention.
We're also in the process of hiring more building inspectors, so, or inspectors to go out there and aggressively enforce.
Thank you. Is there a potential hotline that GURA can have? So if we know it's a Section 8 house and they don't have collections?
Yeah, just, I'll give you Liz's cell number. That's the hotline.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next couple of questions. I know we're running out of time, so I'll just do a couple questions together. And I know, Mr. Sablan, you did address a lot of this already, but if you wanted to add anything to questions 4 and 5, so are there ways to evaluate effectiveness of the actions that you've taken, and how fast are you able to respond to illegal dumping?
I just wish we were like Gura, that we can just go there and take pictures and tell the people living in front that if you don't clean this up, next time we come. But in our roads, there's nobody to talk to. And even if we tell them, you better not be there next time we come back, we don't know who dumps it. We don't have cameras. Our only cameras are our eyes. I even made a suggestion there that maybe we should do something like the Crime Stoppers and have a Baste Basula task force and give rewards to people that know and see people dumping. Take their license plate or something. They can call in anonymously and say, hey, I just saw this vehicle, this license plate, dumping this. And the task force will go over that, and if they really capture them and convict them, they get a reward for it, much like the... I don't see any other way. No matter how many cameras, no matter how many cameras we put out there, you got cameras there now, like Gura said, people are still robbing. Senator Moylan said, they're still robbing homes. Have a camera there, and we still can't capture them, And so, but as far as how to measure the effectiveness, I think coming together like this is one way to do it. We all talk with each other, and we all basically have the same common problem. I heard Larry talk about the commercial businesses not having. Well, you know what? If somebody would do a revamp of the business license law, maybe they should include your agency in it. They check off GRT, they check off Public Works, they check off Fire Department, they check off Land Management to make sure that they all have their proper stuff in place. Why don't they have one for solid waste? And you can't get checked off until you bring proof of a receipt that you have a commercial bin for your business. Make that part of the license process. And that way, they've gotten a thing. And while we're revamping that, I digress, but maybe we should also think about, if you want to raise really some money, raise the license fees. I'll give you an example. We're completing Liberation Day today, the carnival, 60 days. A poor vendor who takes a license for 60 days has to pay upwards of $250 for those 60 days to operate a business. Someone that takes an annual fee for the same business only pays $40 annually. Does it make sense? I don't know, but I digress. But then maybe these are the kind of things that we have to look into. But for this commercial, I think, and then also make it mandatory that every household has a bin. And like Mayor said, maybe you can make it into 12 monthly payments, but put it in their bill, but they have a bin, Larry can trace where those bins are going. You cannot lend your neighbor your bin because it has a chip, if it goes to somewhere or whatever. But I think that's one of the reasons is people don't have bins, so they take it, or they give it to somebody. Say they pay somebody to take your, whoever comes and does your lawn. Hey, boy, just take one my bag of trash there. Here's your money. Well, there's the money, but the trash don't go to where it's supposed to go. You know, it gets tossed again someplace. So those are just my ideas. I don't know if Mayor has any other.
I just want to add that I think share all the sentiments the mayor share on the table and my colleagues. But when you speak about effectiveness, 2 years ago, I took matters into my own hand and communicated with land management, Chamorro Land Trust, and the Public Works. I listed their support. They gave me support to bring boulders to the intersection. Pretty sure you guys are aware of the intersection of Route 15, Marble Cave, and Carnation Road. So Carnation Street. So what had happened is they've been dumping there for so long. But guess what? Got the support to barricade it, put up proper signage. Yes, it deterred the dumping issue in that area. But guess what now again? They moved to another area. And I'm not going to go down and barricade 1,000 Steps or Marble Cave, which these are scenic areas that are constantly being dumped on. And then every other week or weekend, we have to go down there and find white goods or trash. It's a tackle. All of the mayors and even our constituents' cleanup efforts, everything's in place that needs to be done. The effectiveness is there. The organizations come out. Mrs. Denny, very advocate towards recycling too. So the efforts are there. I think we just have to revisit the avenue and see what else can we contribute to it. I mean, I call Glenn. He knows. When I go there's people concerned about trucks going down to Marble Cave. What are they dumping? What's inside the truck? Nobody knows. What hours? Like, is there a law? From what time are trucks supposed to be traveling? What time are they supposed to be dumping those materials? Those are questions that I get. So I asked for EPA to go find out and make some assessments on what's going on there. But I'm kind of surprised that even with DPR and sites that are in Manila registered as so-called the scenic sites in the community, that there's only so little being addressed and concerned there. It's either the mayors or volunteers that's cleaning up the place. Or even my colleague, the neighbor, the owner, Mr. Ken Koki, that handles the golf course ground. So we all work collaboratively to try to get these things. So we are, again, doing it effectively. But once you pick it up, like they said, it's going to keep coming back. Reoccurs. So it's like a wheel. How do we stop that wheel? That's where we're at.
If I may just say something, I like the idea of I would say, na basta basula hotline, right? Stop the illegal dumping, where, you know how we have that phrase, if you see something, say something, where we do encourage people, if you see something, say something, report it, right? And maybe have some kind of media blitz on illegal dumping and how we can encourage people to, if they see something, say something, and here's the hotline where you can call to report people that are illegally dumping. You know, I'm sure we come across it all the time, but it's like, okay, who do we call, right?
Mr. Gass, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody kind of didn't misunderstand what I was saying about the cost of the carts that we have. We foot that bill up front. We don't charge the people for that. That's built into their $30 a month fee. We do not charge them for the carts. We pay for that up front.
Thank you, Mr. Duenas.
Excuse me. I believe we're on the right track, and it's very evident to me based on what Angel and Gura, as well as the good mayor from, and what I'm getting at is, and Senator, you brought it up, a hotline, terrific idea. In lieu of conjunction with an education campaign, she mentioned exactly what I wanted to say. If you see something, say something. You have a hotline. You know, just like the neighborhood watch, like Angel said, if you see a pickup truck with white goods and trash out on the road at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you got to ask yourself, where is he going with that bunch of trash. You see something, say something, call the hotline. I think that would be very effective. Again, it's an education campaign. Once we start utilizing, such I mentioned earlier, the big billboards, say something, hotline, whatever you want to call it, the basula, something, something, that's great. Say something, the hotline, I think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Siniklis? Question is evaluating effectiveness and how fast you respond to illegal dumping.
Okay, I'm going to stick to the questions here. So how do we evaluate effectiveness of actions to address illegal dumping? So one of the measures that we use is the decline of illegal dumping. We look at our database, and if there's a trend that illegal dumping is declining, then our effectiveness is working. We also do follow-up inspections as a result of our citations and our notices. So those are measures that we use to measure effectiveness, but we also rely again on the mayors and our partners in addressing illegal dumping. And I just want to make something really clear: illegal dumping versus littering versus overflowing trash bins. It kind of gets all thrown into the mix. But, for our illegal dumping, we don't really have too many illegal dumping complaints. We get a lot of other complaints that, from storage on private properties, as opposed to illegal dumping. And the reason why is because the illegal dump sites are huge. So that could be just one complaint because it could cover like a mile of illegal dumping. So maybe that's why our numbers are short. But total, we have like 146 thus far of complaints, solid waste complaints that we've investigated. And we've issued over 20 or more litter citations and notice of violations we also issue. So effectiveness is measured by the decrease of illegal dumping activity, is how we measure effectiveness. How fast does our agency respond to illegal dumping situations? We prioritize, of course, emergencies. So if there's a solid waste complaint that involves a fire or a spill, then that prioritizes and trumps everything else, human health and the environment. Now, if a complaint is brought to our attention of somebody throwing trash, they discovered a trash bag or they discovered litter, we put it into our database and we stick with our schedule because there's other people that submitted complaints. So we have to address all complaints. So the way to effectively address complaints is by consolidating them into villages and addressing it in 5 to 6 villages every quarter. Now, depending on the village, there's some villages that maybe have 1 or 2 complaints. So we move on to the next. So oftentimes we're already going into the following quarter. So it's not that we don't stop. We just have to make sure we manage correctly because we have other mandates that we have to do. So we just have to make sure that we address all our mandates that we have.
Just a follow-up question. Have you seen a decrease in number of cases, and do you see a decrease after they're given their notice of violation?
When a person gets a notice of violation, the likelihood of them happening again, it's really low. But we do have alleged violators that are, they continue to violate the law, and we have no problem issuing notice of violations to them. But there was, again, like I used the example of the construction, demolition, debris, illegal dump sites as being a very successful, program that we implemented on the disposal plan reviews. So illegal dump sites today are predominantly household in nature. You got, the Pampers, the household trash, the food items, and tires, you got white goods, as opposed to construction debris 10 years ago. So we measure that as a success because of the decline, but household waste is up. That's the problem that we're having. household waste. We also have problems with people squatting in private properties and just trashing up the place. And then unfortunately, we have to get with the landowners, and they're ultimately the responsible party because it's their property. So we try to work with them in compliance, but people who are squatting, the homeless down in Agana is problematic. I mean, a lot of the trash and the complaints is as a result of homelessness. And likewise with Tuman. So we try to work with the landowners to address those problems because, oftentimes it's on private property. And if it's on the public easement, again, we rely on the mayors.
Thank you. Mr. Tapasnia, Ms. Napoli. The questions were, how do you evaluate effectiveness? And I think you answered that earlier. And how fast do you respond? I think you kind of covered that, but if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, the earlier question about, or the discussion about the hotline, if I can just recommend it, if we do that, I mean, it's probably not going to be very effective if it's a 7-digit number. It should be like 911 or 311, 211, so that if you actually see something and you're going to report it, you're not saying, okay, what was the hotline number? So I don't think it's very effective if it's a 477, whatever.
Thank you. So did you want to add to that?
No, actually, I wanted to start on the next set of questions.
Okay,
first.
great. Yeah, we're kind of rounding
Okay,
off the roundtable. So yes, I do want to get into recommendations, whether it's administrative, community outreach, intercollaboration, or laws that need to be changed.
Okay,
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and start.
So question number 6, does your agency have collaborative efforts with other agencies in addressing illegal dumping? And how can interagency efforts be increased? So our response basically is that we rely a lot on the mayors and their outreach to their constituents as the primary investigative process. They work with their constituents. If there's non-compliance, then GWAMEP comes in and we require compliance, and we attach statements from the mayors that they try to work with these individuals for compliance. And then, they are also relied upon on cleaning up those public easements that don't have alleged violators. So again, when we investigate sites that have illegal dumping activity and we can't find an alleged violator and it's along the public easements, we contact the mayors for cleanup. So we rely heavily on them as well. We also work with revenue and tax to obtain information on vehicles and driver's license information. We would like to try and get access, read-only access, so that we don't bombard them with our needs as well. We take a lot of their resources out of the counter, and they're pretty much busy as well. We work with land management and Chamorro Land Trust properties. So on the Chamorro Land Trust properties, there's a lot of solid waste violations on Chamorro Land Trust properties. So we work with CLTC inspectors for compliance. We do joint inspections together, and that's been pretty successful. We've also done joint inspections with Department of Public Health and Social Service, the vector control program for the waste tire management for the Zika virus, to prevent that. So we work with them and other agencies. Question number 7, does your agency have recommendations to change the law in addressing illegal dumping? And my answer basically is yes, we like to implement the following: mandatory trash service to all households via utility bills, the bottle bill implementation, the zero waste initiatives, greening roadways outreach, plastic bag disposal ban, and extended producer responsibility for problematic waste streams. And of course, homeowners, businesses, government, military, and solid waste management facilities' responsibilities on the management of waste tires, junk vehicles, and scrap metals. And the reason why I indicate especially junk vehicles is because a lot of the complaints that we're receiving nowadays that we're investigating is vehicle accumulation or junk yards created in residential areas. So we're trying to address that problem as well. But it's not just a Guam EPA problem, it's it's a lot of different agencies that should be involved in its enforcement. So that's what one of the things that we like to implement.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Sablan?
Yes, Glenn just mentioned it, mandating the bins for every household, and laws maybe that, don't give them a $500 fine or whatever. And don't go first time, second time, third time. The first time around, you pay $1,000, $2,000. You trash, we want cash, Giving them a chance, they're not going to learn. And I've seen some places where if you're caught as a violator hurting the environment, they take your picture, your name, and they publish it in the newspaper. And they say, I'm hurting the environment. And they'll never do it again, because then everybody in Guam's going to know who this person is. And I don't know whether we can do it legally, but I've seen places in the States that do it this way. The other thing is the dumping, the trash allowance for the mayors. We've got to increase that from once a day to, I don't know, the mayors would tell you, but if we're only going to be able to, and I'm sure Larry doesn't really like this, but if we're going to be only waived one tipping fee a day, trash just piles up with the mayor's offices, because some of them can afford to go ahead and bring it in and they pay the tipping fee like that, but some places they can't afford more than once a day, the exclusion or the waiver. So maybe that's something that we can look at, maybe twice a day, just as a compromise. And then the other thing, I know Glenn brought up these things about abandoned vehicles and all this stuff growing up in people's yards. But I noticed in this year's FY 2020 budget bill, where EPA, again, is given some $2.8 million from the recycling fund, which is fine and dandy, but the thing is, it doesn't guarantee that the Mayor's Council is going to get it. It's at their discretion. I think one year, well, it was in FY19, where it was mandated out of the EPA funding that out of that 2.8, 2.3 was going to go to the Mayor's Council of Guam to continue working with the abandoned vehicles and all the recyclables. I know Senator Moylan had approached us and asked us whether we should make that an annual appropriation. I believe we should make it enough, because if we don't get any funding again this year after September 30, abandoned vehicles, white goods, tires, all these are just going to go, again, lay on the wayside until we do get funds to do this program. I believe EPA would continue to support us because we do have a program up to 2020, but the funding ends on September 30. So maybe when you guys consider the FY 2020 budget bill on EPA's side, that there be an appropriation there to the Mayor's Council of Guam to continue the recycling program. And maybe, Senator, I know you mentioned about mayors try to help with the household trash and things like that from the recycling fund. We would actually need, I believe, an amendment to that statute to allow for that to happen. We don't object. If that should be the case, it'd be good, because then there'll be a funding source.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What about recycling bins at the mayor's offices or village centers? Does that require a permit? Glenn?
Actually, for the mayor's program for the recycling revolving fund, they actually have, they submitted an SOP on how they're going to manage that waste stream. So some of the mayors opted for consolidation sites, and others didn't want to do consolidation sites, and they just call for pickups. So they'll ask residents to bring it out to the curbside, and they'll have their contractor come and pick it up for them.
What about composting? Can that be something that outreach can be done at the mayors or the villages as far as composting of organic material
Yes, certainly, yes. We've also done that program in the past. Yeah.
And is that something that's funding dependent, or what kind of resources are needed to promote recycling and
Actually,
composting
that's not
efforts?
a funding component, because some private companies come and do the program. They offer it to the mayors, that they'll come out and they'll have their machines there, and, you know, if you let your residents know, we'll be there for this certain time, bring whatever it is that they need, and then they just take it away with them whenever they, you know, they chip all these stuff. The problem there is actually Department of Agriculture, is because we have to make sure that whatever is being done doesn't carry the fire ants, and it doesn't carry this other stuff. So there's another step that we have to go through to make that thing really happen, but it does happen. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Nicholas.
So in regards to the composting, so the law that states that if you're a household of 3 or less, you can actually compost without a permit. And otherwise, you need a composting permit. But there's services out there that if you wanted to have your green waste chipped, there's permitted facilities that offer that service. They'll come out with their chipper mulcher, and they'll chip it on site for you, and then you can just manage it accordingly.
Thank you. Mayor Savaras, anything that you would like to add as far as recommendations?
Well, one of the things that we do when residents call us, because at the bottom of their bill, it's highlighted, and many of them don't even see this, that it's highlighted in yellow, that if you have bulky waste, which are appliances, they're allowed up to 5 items twice a year for disposal with GWSA. So we always ask when they call that they have bulky items, we do ask if they are customers to Guam Solid Waste, and then we advise them. Many times if we find stuff along the roads or in our parks, my staff and I are all customers of Guam Solid Waste. We will just take it whenever we don't have the purchase orders for disposal. However, you know, we don't have a staging area in Dedido. What we do is just wait until we do, and then we haul it from the residents that don't have the services to the recycling facilities.
Thank you. So I'd like to recognize Mayor Gogui, sorry. Did you want to add something as far as recommendations?
Yeah, one of the things that Angel had mentioned is the possibility of allowing mayors to do multiple runs, you know, in the course of a day. And obviously that's going to bring up some issues with Guam Solid Waste. I mean, because some mayors can bring in 3 or 4 dump loads within a day, substantially increasing the volume of trash collected by the mayors and dumped and ultimately making its way to Guam Solid Waste. However, this is something we really should consider, is that, you know, and I don't think it's going to be as much of an accounting issue as some might be concerned about, is that, like, for example, in my village, and I'm sure it applies to all villages, we do not necessarily take advantage of dumping every single day that's available to us. Because obviously, dumping trash is not our primary function in the course of a workday. And then they're actually open on Saturdays, which if we have trash to dump, we can haul to the transfer station, and it's still considered a day of dumping at no cost to the mayor for the first load. So if we take a look at how many days that the mayors are allowed to dump in the course of a year, and we serialize these forms that we take down to Guam Solid Waste with the vehicle number with our respective offices, and we use that many loads of dumping of trash throughout the course of years, as long as we don't exceed that, you know, we should be allowed to dump, you know, our trash maybe twice a day because we skipped a day, maybe 3 times in one day because we skipped 2 days. I mean, that will allow us to actually manage or better manage not only our efforts to keep the villages clean, but our resources and not spending every single day dumping trash. Because at sometimes, because we're taking them to transfer stations, the line could be backed up for about 30 minutes. So I've got a vehicle sitting in line waiting to unload the trash at the transfer station in Tamuning, Mr. Rubbishman, for 30 minutes. And that's 30 minutes of lost time. I can say, okay, instead of doing it every single day, which I obviously can't do because there are other priorities that we've got to contend with inside the village, outside of just dumping trash. If we were allowed to create these serialized vouchers or numbered vouchers for the number of dumps we can do in the course of a year, during the days that they're open, and say, okay, January 1st is a holiday, that doesn't count. January 2nd, if it's a weekday or a Saturday, that's dump number 1. And if on that day, because of the holidays, I have 2 dumps or 2 loads to take down there, I can use 1 and 2 for that year. And as long as I don't exceed, it comes out to probably about 340 loads of trash that I can take down in the course of a year. As long as I don't exceed that, that allows us to take advantage of what's authorized by law. And then like Dedido, if we exceed those number of dump runs in the course of a year, then we start paying. I don't have a problem with that, but I think that requires serious consideration. And obviously when Senator Kelly Marsh Titano was here, we're talking, we're concerned about those who can't afford to pay. But so is GURA. GURA, the people that they service are those low to moderate income families that can't afford housing. But they still require their tenants to have trash service. Now, they may come behind and subsidize the cost of that trash collection. But at one point in time, when I used to support the functions of public health under the public welfare program, it was my understanding that, like telephone, when those who are receiving TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, if they had a phone, that got subsidized into their benefits, that they were paying for their phone. However, they received cash benefits, through TANF to pay for that phone. And it wasn't, trash was never an issue at that point in time because when I was with GovGuam back in the days, because we weren't paying for trash.
Sorry,
But
excuse me, Mayor Gogi, can you just clarify what TANF is?
temporary assistance for needy families. That's under Division of Public Welfare. So that's the cash assistance of public welfare. And then, of course, you have the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is formerly known as food stamps. But, obviously, TANF is limited to 5 years. But there can be a mechanism, I believe, through public health where those who are on public assistance can be subsidized in their trash collection through a public welfare program benefit, but mandating nonetheless that these people have, that all residential homes have trash collection. Because, we talk about Orange County. I own a home in Clark County, Washington State. And when I first bought my house, I didn't get to choose my solid waste collection. I bought my house, I connected my utilities, and the county said, this is the company that's going to collect your trash, and this is how much you're going to pay. And if I didn't pay, there was a lien against my property. A lien placed against my property because I did not pay my bill. The question we have to ask ourselves ultimately is, how important is it to us as leaders, as legislatures and executive heads of our different communities, how important is it to us to keep this island clean and to protect our environment?
Thank you. That's very important. I feel that we need to work on the front end of things a lot more in addition to the other areas. But just a really quick question. Would you be supportive of the vouchers, let's say incentives, if you did more recycling, that if you can keep the money, I guess, suppose, or the mayors can hold on to the money if there was less runs to solid waste and more recycling? Is that something?
Well, that's a good question. But when you talk about recycling, you take a look at the recycling companies. At one point in time, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, we started taking the revolving recycling fund and subsidizing the cost of the recyclers to get rid of this or to accept this stuff and get rid of it because they weren't making any money. And so we think that recycling is actually generating a lot of revenue for these recycling companies, and it really isn't. And, when you think about the cost, in Orange County, I believe, California, just like in Oregon and Washington State on the West Coast, what seems to be more successful is the bottle bill. And we have a bottle bill on the books. And we still have yet to implement the bottle bill. It means if you buy it, I'm going to keep 5 cents or 10 cents or whatever it is for that particular state or, implemented by the county. And then when you return it, I'm going to give you your money back. And so, when we take a look at what we think we can do on Guam, and we base it on the successes of other communities, we've really got we got to not just engage in that effort, but we got to embrace it. We talk about wanting to do these things, and we're thinking, well, these are good ideas, and we pass these laws, but we haven't fully embraced, the successes to make it a success here on Guam. And, it is trash management, whether it be household waste or recyclables or what, is a costly effort. I'm sure Mr. Gass can tell you it is a costly effort, and somebody has to pay for it. And in order to make sure that it's paid for, we've got to be able to embrace and effectuate those things that make it work. And the bottle bill is something that's been on the books for almost 2 decades now, and we have yet to implement a bottle bill.
Yes. Thank you, Mary Gogui. We only have about 5 minutes left, so I just want to give some opportunities for the other members to respond to recommendations. So, Mr. Gast.
All right. On my recommendations was, of course, mandatory collection for residential and commercial property owners, felonies for commercial dumping or littering, set up a whistleblower fund or the Crime Stoppers Fund. Take some of the proceeds from fines and penalties for people that are that are caught illegally dumping, and use that as an incentive. Increase the items that can be landfilled. There's a lot of items that are piling up that basically have no place to go. We were just talking about recycling and bottle bills. I'm going to have to take a close look at plastic bottles because I'm paying over $900 a ton to get them off the island. Now, if I have to start passing that cost on to the consumers, nobody's going to be recycling. And those are the kinds of things that we're having to look at. Bottle bills, the idea is fantastic. Ask California. They went bankrupt in 2 years because people started shipping in bottles from places where they didn't pay it. That was the biggest contraband that they had. And then they're paying out for all the bottles that come in, but no revenue coming in for those bottles.
Easier to control on Guam.
That's true, but they...
Because that was what was happening in Oregon. People were coming across from Washington, and so Washington implemented a bottle bill.
But it is something that you have to look out for. Let's see, where was that? Hold property owners accountable for the illegal dumps on their area, on their property. Have them required to clean it up. If they have repeat violations on their property, the property owner should be required to barricade that area to where it doesn't have easy access for that. Those are just kind of the suggestions that I had. A lot of it's been hashed over throughout, but those are the kind of ideas that is kind of putting a responsibility on garbage. One of the things, allow a lot more things into the landfill. If you look at getting rid of a cathode ray TV, I can't find anybody to take it. I'm going to have to quit accepting them. Because just if I take the cathode ray tubes out, the closest bid I got was $800 a tube. I can't pay $800 a TV when they could be placed in the landfill and crushed and not cause any harm to anything. There's a lot of costs that are driving things on Guam that don't drive it anywhere else. And just the cost of transporting stuff off this island. I mean, if we could get a company to come in here and make parking bumpers out of plastic bottles, that would be the greatest thing in the world. You can't make park benches. You can't make signs. You can't do that kind of stuff with the recycled plastic because those are things that in the heat of Guam, they will sag and melt. But a parking bumper will melt to the ground. And those things are great. But that's pretty much what I have.
Thank you, Mr. Gass. Mr. St. Nicholas, did you want to add on to what you were saying earlier regarding recommendations to address illegal dumping?
You know, actually, when we were given the email, I responded to the first email and I broke it down, and then I got the second one with your 9 items. But you know, on the if I can, you know, on the enforcement side of the house, to help with the enforcement, you know, our the solid waste management program was mandated to and approved for 10 positions, and we currently have 3 filled, 7 vacancies. Under the Litter Control Act, we actually have apprehending officers that we identify, 9 agencies, and Guam EPA is the only one that's issuing citations. Utilizing what we already have existing, you know, the police department, Parks and Recreation, Department of Ag Conservation officers, public health, of course the mayors. We have the port and seaport police and Department of Public Works. That's a lot of boots on the ground. So, you know, what I did was I actually looked for what the law calls out for. So basically 50% goes to the Guam Beautification Fund and 50% goes to the Litter Control Fund, which is managed by Guam EPA. So the proposal that I would like to propose is incentives for this program, the Litter Control Program, is basically allocating the funds to 25% to the courts because they play a role, they process, and if a citation or an alleged violator doesn't pay their citation, they send out their court marshals to find them to subpoena everybody. So 25% to the court, 25% to the Guam Beautification Fund, and then 50% to the apprehending agencies. Instead of 50% to Guam EPA, I think that 50% going to the agencies that issues a citation would give them incentive enough to maybe do more. And then the use of the funds. So I changed the use of the funds, 25% to the courts for processing and court fees as it relates to litter citations and the subpoenas of those. And then 25% to the Guam Beautification Fund. They can use it for basically the intended purpose, education, outreach, etc. And then the 50% to the apprehending agency would be for equipment, supplies, and labor, just O&M stuff for their needs in regards to this litter citation program. With the 3 personnel that I have, to include myself, and leveraging these agencies would be an increase that would reap benefits to the island in terms of illegal dumping and litter that's going on right now. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and if you never fill my vacancies, then I'll settle for those guys who are boots on the ground who can help me do my job.
Thank you so much. Mr. DePasnia, Ms. Napoli, what recommendations would you like to add just to round up the discussion?
Do you have any recommendations?
None other than the hotline, and we will continue to do our part to encourage our residents that it's not only the dumping around our boundaries that we're worried about, is we don't want them to take it elsewhere either.
Great. It's 5 o'clock, and I really appreciate everybody coming here for this discussion. This is no means the end of the discussion, and there's a lot of great ideas, and I'm sure my colleagues and myself will pursue these great ideas and work with you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you for your hard work. Sorry, just formalities. The committee will continue to receive testimony until 4 p.m. Monday, August 12th. Please address testimonies to myself, Sabina Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue Taxation, and Procurement. It can be dropped off at the mailboxes here at the legislature or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. The Committee on Environment, Revenue Taxation, and Procurement is now adjourned.